This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
It is now time for our special guest. We're delighted to welcome Dr. Mary Clifton. Mary Clifton, MD, who is a graduate of Michigan State University, has practiced internal medicine for nearly 20 years in northern Michigan, where she teaches her patients about the importance of following a plant-based diet. She is a nutrition counselor for a cancer survivors group and is currently conducting a funded study that is researching the effects of plant-based diets on arthritis and fibromyalgia. Dr. Clifton is also a clinical associate professor at Michigan State University's College of Human Medicine, where she lectures to students on nutrition and organizes the lecturers responsible for nutrition education at medical colleges. Dr. Clifton has co-authored with her daughter, Chelsea Clinton, an OB/GYN physician in Manhattan, a book with the same title as her talk this evening, and runs a very active website and blog at drmarymd.com. She is currently visiting Hawaii with her younger daughter, Anna. Anna, would you like to stand and take a bow? There she is. Hope you're enjoying Hawaii. Great. Dr. Clifton's presentation tonight is entitled Waste Away: How to Lose Weight Joyfully and Supercharge Your Life. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mary Clifton.
Speaking. Flowers for you. Aloha. Vegan home.
It's quite different than All right. Thank you so much for coming tonight. This is 2 speaking engagements while I'm here in Hawaii, and then I'm going to go to Kauai and put my feet up for a week and relax before I move from northern Michigan to northern Minnesota. A little bit colder, but a little bit more fun up there with some really neat opportunities to work with telemedicine and forward the opportunity to bring doctors to locations where doctors aren't easily accessible. So thank you for coming tonight. I personally, was doing ordinary internal medicine for many years and having fun and seeing my patients and raising my kids. And then I went to the doctor 6 years ago, and everything was great at my appointment. But when my laboratories came back, he stopped me in the hallway a few days later at the hospital and told me that my cholesterol was 211, and more alarmingly, that my blood sugar was 125. Which at 126, we make a diagnosis of diabetes. So I was well on my way to being a diabetic, just in my late 30s. Which was just such a shock for me because I was exercising and I was eating well. I got up every morning and ate some frosted mini wheats with skim milk, and then at 10 o'clock I ate a yogurt or a piece of cheese to get my calcium and maintain my protein, right? And then at lunch, I had a cherry chicken salad, which in Traverse City, everyone is like our standard salad. We have chicken with a whole bunch of cheese and some dried cherries because we're the cherry capital. And then I'd have a little bit more yogurt or cheese in the afternoon, and then meat, 2 veggies at night, right? It was the perfect American diet, so there was no reason for me to be getting sick. But I didn't know anything about nutrition really. 11 years of training, and really no training at all on nutrition. And so I went home with this diagnosis of prediabetes and cracked open my computer and started to learn and tried to figure out exactly what a saturated fat was and what carbohydrates are and what's a good carbohydrate versus a bad carbohydrate. And I realized all the advice I was giving my patients and all the advice I was following for my own diet was coming from what I was watching on the television really, and not from anything I had ever learned. And so anyway, after a couple of weeks of just digging around and not really finding anything that seemed to make a lot of sense, I had read about these vegetarian vegan diets, but there was no way that that was something I would pursue. Then I thought it might hurt me and not be healthy, and where would I get my protein? It's really funny looking back. But in any case, I had a vegan day. I just accidentally had a vegan day. I had my milk sour, so I couldn't have milk with breakfast, and I didn't pack my snacks, so I didn't have my yogurt and cheese, and then my lunch was served to me. I wasn't in charge of my lunch, and that turned out to be vegan. And when I went out for steak that night, they didn't have the cut I preferred, so I had pasta instead. And then oddly, in the morning, my sugar was approaching 100 for the first time since my diagnosis. So I kind of, well, all right, I'm going to take a run at this and see how it goes. So I went vegan overnight. That's not easy. And I mean, that's really tricky, and I understand that this is tricky. It's still hard for me to stay vegan. I still have a lot of cravings, and so I present this talk with a really joyful expression and a whole bunch of great little tips and advice, but I want you to understand that I don't perceive this as something easy to do, something easy to start, or something easy to stay with. Every opportunity you have to re-engage and be around a group of vegans and talk to people just helps you to stay on track. So I encourage you to do all of this. And I want you to know that I think it's hard. It's a hard transition, an incredibly valuable one, probably the most important thing that you can focus on in your life for keeping you healthy. So here goes. I want you to know why you should be vegan, and then I want to help you learn how to do it in ways that are pretty simple. So the first question is, what happens with fat, when you eat fat? What is unhealthy fat? What is healthy fat? And where does fat go when it's being utilized properly? We know, right, where fat goes when there's an excessive amount of fat, but where does healthy fat get used? So this is a picture of a cell membrane. When you're eating healthy fat and you're absorbing it and metabolizing it and using it, it creates this phospholipid bilayer around each of your cells. Each of your cells across your whole body has these fantastic cell membranes that operate to make the inside of the cell slightly different from the outside of the cell. Different levels of certain salts like sodium and potassium, different proteins inside compared to outside. So these cell membranes are really important. And it's important that they be flexible and squishy and really soft so that they can communicate with other cells very effectively. Some of the proteins, can you see that little arrow on the blue transport protein? We rely on these transport proteins to move proteins across the cell membrane. And particularly in the central nervous system at UC Davis, we've identified that there are certain proteins that are created in neighboring cells that are required within the neurons of other cells so that the cell can operate properly. So isn't it interesting that certain proteins that belong inside one cell are created in a neighboring cell and transported into that cell with these transport proteins? So thinking about healthy fats, if you're a hummingbird and you have these wonderful, miraculous, amazing wings, they put a whole bunch of flexible, low-inflammatory omega-3 fats in the cell membranes of their wings, because each one of those cells needs to function perfectly, and it needs to communicate perfectly with all of its neighbors. It takes unhealthy, inflexible omega-6 fats in the diet and puts it down in the feet, because the feet just hang there on a hummingbird. But in a tundra deer, where I'm moving to, up in Duluth, Minnesota, the deer hooves have to be very, very flexible and soft, and the cells have to work very well, because if their hooves crack on that extremely cold ground in the winter, that's the end for that deer. So they put all of their healthy omega-3 fats in their hooves, and they store their omega-6s in their central part of their body. So first question of the evening, as a human being, where do you think you put all of your fabulous flexible omega-3 fats? What do we need to work perfectly in our bodies? Joints, arteries, and in your brain. So particularly in these areas where proteins have to transport across using these transport systems in the brain, this is just another schematic of that. When these proteins get across, they require the transport protein to bend. They require the cell wall to be flexible so they can sort of wiggle through. Well, what we're finding at these studies at UC Davis is that these transport proteins are not as flexible when there's too much unhealthy fat in the diet. These proteins that are required inside the cell are getting across the transport a little ways, but then they're stopping because the cell wall is just too inflexible, too tough, and then they're breaking off. So this important piece of data that we need inside the cell is not able to get inside the cell because of the inflexibility of the fats. And that's why we see so much more memory loss, so much more Alzheimer's in folks that have adopted and are consuming a Western diet that's higher in omega-6 fats. So this is your chart for omega-6 fats versus omega-3 fats. And what I want you to focus on is the linoleic acid, breaking down into gamma-linoleic acid, and finally arachidonic acid, which is the final precursor before you break down into pro-inflammatory prostaglandins and leukotrienes. On the other hand, the omega-3 fats come from canola oil, walnuts, greens, soy, all kinds of vegetables and beans, and break down over their chemical reactions into anti-inflammatory prostaglandins and leukotrienes. So if you're experiencing any type of pain, like premenstrual cramps or arthritis or headache, and you use Motrin or Aleve or Naproxen to stop that pain from bothering you, what you're doing is preventing that final chemical reaction where the arachidonic acid breaks down into pro-inflammatory prostaglandins and leukotrienes. In countries where everybody is really healthy, low rates of cancer, low rates of heart disease, not a lot of arthritis, the ratio of omega-6 fats to omega-3 fats is 3-to-1. Because omega-6 fats are less flexible, but they also are less reactive, and they're good for storage. So you still find quite a bit of them, even in healthy foods, because they help to prolong the shelf life of healthy food. In our country, with the amount of animal fats and the amount of fried food we're getting, our omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is more like 20-to-1. So the drug company's answer to that is to suggest that you take some omega-3 fats, right? Because then you'll have all these omega-6 fats in your diet, you'll add some omega-3 fat supplements, and then you'll be at a 3-to-1 ratio. But then, of course, you'll be swimming around in an oil slick, and your immune system hates that. So that's the difference between omega-6 and omega-3 fats. And in my studies in my office, we did randomized controlled trials on fibromyalgia sufferers and on osteoarthritis sufferers. And these trials are pending publication, just a little more statistical analysis. But we found that when you remove the animal fats from the diet and remove the fried food, you see reductions in pain in these patients with arthritis virtually immediately within 2 weeks of starting the diet. And over the entire randomized controlled trial, we saw increases in functionality and decreases in pain. So it works like crazy to get animal fats out of your diet to reduce inflammation and pain. Works like crazy. But the protein is a problem too, because the proteins, the animal proteins, when they're in your intestines, cause some inflammation directly to the lining of your intestines and result in these lining cells sort of separating in what we call leaky gut syndrome. So that some of the bacteria, some of the pieces of protein that are not yet digested, that should really never leave the inside of your intestine, end up going across the intestinal wall and into your bloodstream. Your body hates this. It hates having these little particles in your blood that don't belong there. And so it immediately sort of wraps it up, like with bubble wrap, to protect you from it. And the body's bubble wrap in this case is immunoglobulins. So it creates an immune system response to this bacteria. These bacteria, these small bits of protein, have been tied to diabetes and hypothyroidism and rheumatoid arthritis. And in a lot of cases, what we do with inflammatory arthritis is take medication so that you decrease your immune system's response to the inflammation. And what we really should be telling people is just go vegan. And then you won't have this crazy bacterial translocation, this leaky gut syndrome, and you won't have to take these weird immune modulating medications. And then the great thing is the side effect of going vegan, right, is decreasing heart disease, decreasing cancer, saving some animals, fabulous bright eyes and clear skin, instead of the side effects of rheumatologic medications, which are, tuberculosis and higher rates of certain cancers. The side effects of a vegan diet are pretty nice. So it's a great way to control arthritis pain in all types of arthritis. There's 14 clinical trials showing benefit with rheumatoid arthritis with dietary modification. So we know that your chances of heart disease decrease dramatically going from a meat eater to a vegetarian and then to a vegan, presumably by reducing inflammation and reducing negative fats. There's also benefit to decreasing your risk for cancer, and that's coming primarily from this insulin-like growth factor, or this is at least one mechanism that's a really terrific mechanism. Insulin-like growth factor stimulates the growth of rapidly dividing cells. And IGF is present in its full-on form in dairy, in dairy products. So it's important to get rid of the dairy, because if you're a little tiny baby and you need to grow, right? Every cell in your body is growing. Load that baby up with IGF and get them to grow really big. But if you're 43, the only thing growing on me is fat cells or any cancer cells that may have inappropriately divided and are trying to get a foothold in my system. So getting that IGF out of my system is really important. Particularly important for all you fabulous men out there who are trying to reduce your risk for prostate cancer as you age. When you do these studies and compare IGF levels in the blood to PSA levels in the blood, prostate-specific antigen, the antigen that marks for enlarged prostates, prostate cancer, you find these really nice linear relationships where as you go up on the IGF, you go up on the prostate cancer. If you take these cells out of a person and put them in a petri dish and you drip a little IGF on them, it's like fertilizing your lawn. Cancer loves this stuff. And that's why you really want to get rid of the meat and dairy. If you want to get the big pop, the really big return on dietary change, you want to get these animal proteins out. And instead of replacing meat with dairy and eggs, replace your meat with grains and beans. Beans have as much protein as meat, calorie for calorie. Spinach has as much protein as meat, calorie for calorie. So you're going to get all your protein needs met, but you're also going to get this decrease in IGF. Unfortunately, when you just go vegetarian, you actually see a slight increase in the IGF because you're getting more dairy, presumably. You're switching over to cheese and milk as your protein sources. So much better to go all the way to grains and beans. But does it really work? What difference does it really make if you change your diet? Is it really going to make a difference? We have 400 trials that I could show you tonight, but I'm going to just pull out a few that I thought were particularly valuable. This is one of my favorites for a couple of reasons. This was about how plant consumption affects plasma, antioxidants, and blood pressure levels. You might ask, do I need to go all organic? Well, this study was not organic. It was just fruits and vegetables. 6 months randomized controlled trial where they asked doctors and nurses to ask their patients to increase their fruit and vegetable consumption. That was the whole intervention. And the amazing thing is the incredible power of doctors and nurses telling their patients to increase their fruit and vegetable consumption. If you're a healthcare provider out there and you just do this intervention, you will certainly save lives if that's all you do. But, and what I tell people to do, eat your fruit and vegetables, eat grains and beans instead of meat and dairy. That's a 6-second intervention that you can do for your patients. But 690 people studied, grown-ups, aged 25 to 64. Not a huge increase in fruit and vegetable consumption, just 1.4 portions. 1.4 portions might be a large apple, right? Or maybe a large grapefruit. But just that increase resulted in increased plasma concentrations of alpha, beta carotene, beta cryptoxanthin, ascorbic acid, decreases in systolic and diastolic blood pressure such that the effects would reduce cardiovascular disease in the general population. 1.4 portions, and not even necessarily organic. So then what if you do what I did? What if you just leaped off the cliff and went vegan overnight? What would happen to your diet? Well, the way that the meat and dairy industry makes you think that something really awful is going to happen to your diet is to show you cup for cup comparisons. When I'm acting stupid, my daughter calls me a stoop. That's what the kids are doing nowadays. They shorten it up, so you're a stoop. Or if you're gorgeous, you're gorge, So, or there's all kinds of little shorts. But anyway, you'd be stoop if you look at it cup for cup to eat spinach compared to eating meat, because a cup of meat has a ton more nutrients than a cup of spinach. But if you compared 500 calories of spinach to 500 calories of meat, then you'd be a stoop to eat the meat. It's a calorie for calorie comparison, so make sure that when you're doing comparisons with food that you do it that way, and the plants will always win. They always win. So this is one that I kept right on my computer when I was making this transition for myself. It's a nutrient composition of plants versus animals per 500 calories of energy. So these people compared equal parts of tomatoes, spinach, lima beans, peas, and potatoes to equal parts of beef, pork, chicken, and whole milk. And you can imagine the little pile of vegetables, probably a little bigger than the little pile of animal foods. Bite for bite, your calories are going to be lower. So when you switch over, make sure you eat more food. If you don't increase the amount of food that you're eating, you're going to get hungry. And then you're going to say, I hate this diet. It never worked. I was hungry all the time. And then you quit. But the problem is you just didn't eat enough. So keep that in mind. The problem with portions bothers people at about 6 weeks into the diet, and then it bothers people again at about 6 months. So if you're starting to feel hungry again after 6 months, ramp up your portions because you're getting into that weird portion control thing again. So anyway, if you have a cholesterol problem like I did, my cholesterol was 211, my cholesterol is 133 now. If you have a cholesterol problem, just quit eating it. And then you're not going to get it. There's very small amounts of cholesterol, plant sterols, present in the cell membranes of certain plants, but it's negligible. So the animal-based foods are where you get all your cholesterol. If you're having if you're saying, you know, I really know that I need to eat some healthy fat, and I don't know about these low-fat diets, there is a healthy amount of fat in this diet. There's not this grotesque amount of fat that now you have to metabolize and store and worry over, but there's enough fat to keep you perfectly healthy. And look at the protein. Exactly the same. Well, 33 compared to 34. And then it just gets ridiculous. The differences in beta carotene, vitamin C, folate, vitamin E, all the way down. Now you can argue, and you may not be correct, but you can argue that this iron is not as absorbable, as bioavailable than the animal-based heme iron, but there's so much more of it in grains and beans. And you need this vitamin C to absorb the iron as a co-absorber in the small intestine. So if you don't eat your animals with a lot of vitamin C containing products, you're not going to get the iron from them anyway. And then the other surprising thing, look down here at the calcium. Actually more calcium in plants than in animals. So you'll do very well on your calcium. Dark green leafies, nuts, grains and beans, a lot of the squashes, just loaded with calcium, so don't worry. And this is another interesting interface with the American Medical Association and recommendations from American Medical than world recommendations. Here in the US, we're recommending 1,200 milligrams to 1,800 milligrams of calcium for women to protect their bones. The World Health Organization, does anyone know what they recommend for calcium? 400 milligrams. 400 milligrams. And they studied all the data that we've collected, and they felt that really they have nothing to support a recommendation higher than 300 milligrams. But they know they're concerned because when women, particularly in developing countries, have a fracture, then we have a real problem. It's very dangerous. So they recommended on the safe side and went all the way up to 400 milligrams. How much protein do they recommend? World Health Organization. Here in the US, we're hearing like 40, sometimes I hear 60 if you're a sick person. WHO recommends 22. When you're not under the influence of, you know, the American Dairy Association and the meat industries like you are here in the US. So maybe you're thinking, well, I'm not going to do what she did. I'm not going to go overnight vegan, but maybe I'll do everything in moderation, right? So I want to challenge the concept of moderation here in America. If you look at meat consumption by country, in ounces per day, what, you know, in America you would consider a healthy serving of meat to be the palm of your hand, right? Like a deck of cards, palm of your hand, 4 to 6 ounces, depending on if you're male or female. So 4 to 6 ounces in America would be considered a good serving of meat. What would be considered a high-consuming, meat-eating male or female in France or Germany? High consumption. How many ounces a day do you think it is in France and Germany? Anybody want to venture a guess before I throw it out? 2. Good for you. 2 to 3. In women, 2 ounces constitutes a high-consuming, meat-eating female. If you're a man, 3 ounces in their trials. And if you're in Africa, 1 ounce a day is considered high consumption. In Asia, all of our fabulous, very thin, highly productive, super intelligent Asian friends, less than 1 ounce a day. So often far less than 1 ounce a day. So what I want you to do, me and Dan Draper here, we just want you to go veg. Think about going veg. It's okay to go veg. It's okay to decrease your meat consumption to the hole that you make with your index finger and your thumb and lay that on meat. At that point, you're down to 2 ounces a day. That's a daily supply. If you're a man, you're going to come in around 3 ounces with your bigger hands. So perfect. You're at a high-consuming, meat-eating European. It's still too high, but it's a really, really great way to transition. Instead of doing this deck of cards or palm of your hand, think about it being okay to go veg and surround that piece of meat with more grains and beans because they'll fill you up. They're full of calories, and more vegetables too. So if you're thinking about changing your diet, the first thing people say is, I'm going to keep a great food log. I'm going to write everything down that I eat, and then I'm going to show it to my doctor after 3 months. Don't do that. We find that food logs are very unreliable. Susan Roberts, affiliated with Duke, has done 60 studies on this, and particularly the very thin or the morbidly obese are particularly unreliable, but none of us are good with food logs. We forget to write stuff down. So the best thing to do, 24-hour recall. You can do this with your patients in 60 seconds. You can do it yourself in just a moment while you're sitting here. Just take a pen and write down everything you ate, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and drinks that aren't water. And then we can start to break it down, animal versus non-animal, and then processed versus whole. Then we can start to really get to the bottom of how to improve your diet. And then at that point, it becomes fairly simple. It really does become very simple. I didn't need to stomp my feet and spit out my pacifier and act like such a big baby when it was my turn to change my diet. It really wasn't as hard as I made it out to be. Before, I was eating cereal with milk for breakfast, right? So now I just eat cereal with milk for breakfast, except the milk is a soy milk. Typically, every now and then I choose almond milk or hemp milk or something else, but I still really like soy milk, and I think the concerns with soy are way overblown by an industry that worries about soy milk and soy meats and these transitional products. So you're made to worry very much about soy, but you really don't need to. Waffles are delicious as waffles with soy milk. The soy milk makes them very, very puffy and air-filled, and you'll love your waffles that way. We make a smoothie just minus the yogurt. And if you're a grab-and-go kind of guy, these 2 fruits in the morning is such a great way to go. Really, it's the best thing to eat for breakfast. 2 fruits, and then you've got some simple carbohydrates, some complex carbohydrates with a little fiber so that it absorbs slowly, and then you're just cruising through your morning. The other thing that 2 fruits does for you is extend your fast. There's data that choosing not to eat for periods of time is good for you. So fasting from 8 o'clock at night until 8 in the morning, that 12-hour fast, is very good for your body. But if you choose to eat fruit for breakfast, and maybe you eat your first piece at 8 and you eat your second piece at 10, it allows your body to sort of sustain that fast for a couple more hours, because it really doesn't have to distract itself from, going after an aberrant cancer cell or fighting a bit of stubborn fat. It can just keep doing its thing while it's digesting fruit, because fruit really doesn't require a tremendous amount of the body's activity. Whereas if we transition to a big bowl of cereal and milk, then we really do have to focus on digestion. So maintaining that fast helps to promote some anti-aging hormones in your system. So I like fruit for breakfast. That's my favorite choice for you. But if you're hungry, eat some oatmeal, because it's delicious. Eat some cereal, it's delicious. Just make sure it's as the least processed as you can tolerate. Lunch was surprisingly easy to convert to. Lunch is not that tricky. If you're eating a burger and fries now, you could just eat a veggie burger or 2, because again, lower in calories, and maybe a side salad of some type. All your sandwiches convert to veggie wraps, but make sure you tell them when they're preparing it or when you're preparing it yourself, don't put cream cheese all over it, put hummus inside it, and then you get that yummy, creamy, delicious flavor from the hummus, but you don't get that inflammatory fat like you were getting from the cream cheese. Everybody's got vegan or vegetarian soups, so choose that soup instead of a meaty soup and you'll be right on your way. My chicken salad that I had every day for years, I had no idea, converted over to an Aztec salad with some salsa and some beans. I always have them hold the cheese, and if I'm feeling really decadent, I throw some guacamole on there if I need those calories, and then I can cruise through my afternoon just fine on a slightly different salad. And your snacks. I want to just do a shout out here. I'm not a big fan of snacking. I like the idea of eating and then not eating for a while, but a lot of people like to snack. The problem with snacking is that it's just so hard to remember your healthy snacks, and then sometimes you find yourself racing to the vending machine, and I hate the vending machine. So I want to just think about this with you for a second. I want to do a shout out for raw snacks, because what you really crave, don't you, at 2 in the afternoon when things are going bad and you're tired and your boss is barking at you, or you called your husband just to ask him what was going on and he's upset, so all of a sudden you're headed to the vending machine for some potato chips or some pretzels. Don't want you to do this. What your body is asking you for is crunchy and salty, and there's a reason for that. Because let's say, for example, I showed all of you a video. I showed the whole room a video lasting 20 minutes of people who are not valuable, who are not really even relevant. It doesn't matter if they're clean. It doesn't matter if they're warm. It doesn't matter if they got sick. They just don't matter. And then I take this half of the room and send all of you outdoors. We draw your blood. We can show that in just 20 minutes of those awful images and those thoughts, your immune system decreases. Okay, so that's the gal who's headed for the vending machine at 2 in the afternoon. Your immune system is decreased, your body is really worn out, and now you're going to hit it with a bunch of potato chips. That's crazy, right? When really what your body is asking for is this raw food, because it'll be crunchy, and raw food naturally concentrates sodium. So when your body's asking for crunchy, salty, it's asking you for raw food. So you guys do raw food. The rest of you will show you 8 minutes more of video. We'll show you 8 minutes more video about Mother Teresa and everything amazing that she has done for people who used to be irrelevant. She cleans them, and she makes sure that they're fed, and she takes care of babies that don't have parents. And you guys will go draw your blood. Just 8 more minutes of great positive thinking actually increased your immune system. Even though you saw all that horror that these people saw, that last 8 minutes, very valuable for you. So rather than reaching for some comfort food, try to meditate on something amazing, like Mother Teresa, and see if you can avoid that mid-afternoon snack at all. But if you can't, head for the raw foods. Now dinner's tricky, because you're not perfectly in control of dinner. You've got the kids, you've got a spouse, there's eating out, there's just so many things where dinner can throw things off. And that's where Mark Bittman, who was talking about Mark Bittman? You were, about his Vegan Before 6, is a really good place to start. Vegan at home and not vegan when you go out. If you're trying to get dinner going, doing it at home is a lot easier than going out. Although I swear, we just went to what was that place we went to? Yard House, and they had a whole little batch of Gardein vegan foods. What a blast. It's just so neat. It isn't really all that hard to eat out anymore. It depends on where you go, but it certainly gets easier and easier. One of my favorite places to eat out, and my girls tease me incessantly about this, is Outback Steakhouse, because they have this wonderful baked potato. It's all covered with salt. Have you guys had that potato? It is so delicious. And I have them make it with a bunch of chives, and then I get a side of mushrooms and put the mushrooms on top of the potato and a little bit of A1 sauce. It's so craveable. It's so delicious. And then I do the vegetables and a big salad, and I am just full. I'm like full until way after breakfast the next day. So it just depends on, you can find great food even at a steakhouse. And often when we're out of town, that's where we go for food, because you're always going to get great potatoes and really, really good vegetables, even though it's a steakhouse. In any case, people eat about 9 different meals. So not a particularly varied diet. At my house, we were eating meatloaf, and we had a big salad night. We had hamburger night. We'd have taco night, spaghetti night. So the idea behind 333 is that you have 3 meals that already contain no animal products. Pretty good for you meals, like big salad night, spaghetti night. You don't have to change those meals. Then you have 3 meals that you can pretty easily modify, like chicken stir fry can go to a tofu stir fry, or you can just skip the tofu if you're worried about incorporating tofu into your life right now. Then just put brown rice on instead of white rice, and that gives you a little bit more fiber, plenty of healthy protein. Ramp up the vegetables, eat a bigger portion, and then you've modified that meal. If you're eating a burger, you can always switch to a veggie burger. Just add more pickles, and then you won't notice the slightly different texture. Well, at least for me, I love a pickle. So, and then you can try these 3 new meals. I was standing in my kitchen 3 years into this change and wondering what I was going to feed my girls. They were downstairs watching TV, and Chelsea was home from medical school, and I couldn't think of anything to eat. And I thought, I wish I could make them those pork bundles that I used to make when I was eating meat. They were delicious. It was this pork that was seasoned with brown sugar and fish sauce and garlic and ginger, and oh, they were so good. And we hadn't had them for years, and I missed them. I used to make them a couple times a month. They were hard to make, but they were so good. And then you'd put them inside a lettuce wrap and eat them like a burrito sort of, or a taco. Anyway, I couldn't do that, and I was sitting there thinking about all the things I have to give up for this diet, and then I went, wait a minute, I can just put beans anywhere I put meat, right? Anywhere you put meat, you can put a bean. So maybe I could make pinto bean bundles? Is that completely ridiculous? So I took out 2 big cans of pinto beans, rinsed them, cooked them a little bit more because super well rinsed, very well cooked beans are easily digestible. And then I put all of my favorite ingredients in there. Chelsea came upstairs, my number 1 daughter, and she was like, oh no, we can't eat that. We're vegan now. We don't eat that food. You know what? I'm making it with pinto beans. She could hardly believe it. Anna did not recognize the smell because it had been so long, and she said, what are you making? So anyway, we feasted like kings. So that recipe is on page 71 of my book. I didn't bring any books with me on this trip, but they're available on Amazon and on Kindle. But I really was so pleased that I was able to transition that particular recipe. Anything you're making with beans, or meat, just make with beans. For example, switch one dinner. Meatloaf night, switch it to red beans and rice. But again, make a calorie for calorie comparison so that you don't throw yourself off. So 510 calories compared to 530 calories, right, of beans and rice. 10.7 ounces of meatloaf. You have to eat 25.8 ounces of red beans and rice to get to 500 calories. So you can see how easy it is to lose weight, because I don't think anybody in this room can eat 25.8 ounces of red beans and rice. I mean, that is 3 cups of food. But look at your fat calories. Again, if you're worried about fat, 230 calories from fat goes down to 30 calories from fat. 10 grams of saturated fat, that nasty, unhealthy, omega-6, inflexible fat that I never want you to eat again, goes from 10 grams just down to 0.5 grams. Just such a healthy amount of that fat now. The cholesterol disappears, the fiber goes crazy, still with a day's supply of protein in just 3 cups of red beans and rice. And all of your micronutrients are just gorgeous. So it's very safe and super healthy to convert these meals. Now, if you want to get ridiculously healthy and absolutely fabulous and get all the benefits of being 100% vegan, but you don't want to go all the way, that's totally okay. All of these studies show with absolute certainty that from a health perspective, 95% is as good as 100%. So get your meat consumption under your thumb. If you can move from it being okay to go veg to getting your meat under your thumb, that is just 5% of your calories coming from meat and dairy. That would be 95% of your calories coming from plants. 95% is as good as 100 for your health. So if you want to be veg all the time except Sunday night when you go to your mother-in-law's house for a chicken dinner, that's perfectly okay. Now, if you're doing this for animal rights, if you're doing this to change the world, if you have other reasons, you may find 5% in your diet completely unacceptable. But I'm doing this to make sure that you're as perfectly healthy as you can be. And I want you to be absolutely assured that a little bit is going to be just fine. It's not the idea that every single bite of meat results in another nail in your coffin, and after a certain number of bites of meat, you're dead. 95% is as good as 100. And just a quick shout out for olive oil. I dated a fellow for 2 years, and when I first met him, he was 40 pounds overweight and chronically constipated, actually had a lifetime history of constipation. One of his favorite childhood meals was this minute rice that his mother used to make, and she covered it with hamburger, and then she covered it with cream of mushroom soup. And he loved that dinner. He actually asked me to make him that dinner. There's no way I'm gonna make him that dinner. There's no way. So I made him all of my beans and rice, and I made him whole grain pasta and marinara sauce, and he politely ate a couple of bites, and then he put his hands on his lap, and then he excused himself and went home. And I was like, huh. So I started to ask him what he liked to eat, and then when you talk to him, oh my goodness, what did he like to eat? Bisque. Lobster bisque. He talked about bisque, and he'd just have to sink back in the chair. And ice cream. We would have to stop for ice cream, and this is a personal quirk of mine. I can't stand to watch a man eat an ice cream cone, so I would have to go next door to the tile shop and look for tile that I didn't need and wait for him to finish this ice cream cone. It's disgusting to watch men eat ice cream, but he insisted on stopping, and he is so gross. And so anyway, I finally thought, what my problem is with this guy is my fat content's too low. He loves that creamy food. So I started to cook him the same food, all my same recipes, but I tripled the oil content. So if you're converting and you're looking at my book or you're looking at my cookbook and it doesn't taste right, double or triple the oil content. But use a healthy oil like olive oil, walnut oil, flaxseed oil, canola oil for this short time, for the 6 months, and then your food's gonna taste right, because it's going to taste the way you're used to, the way my ex-boyfriend's food tasted. So I got him to eat my food, and I got him to get into the textures, and we got him on the track, and then I just ratcheted down this concentrated oil source over the next couple of months, like 6 months. And all of a sudden, his weight's dropping, and this chronic problem with constipation and abdominal pain went away for the first time in his life. It got almost down to his high school body weight. Isn't that fabulous? And then we got in this big fight during this enormous snowstorm where you're not even allowed to leave your house or you'll get in a terrible accident and the police will give you a ticket. And he left right in the middle of the snowstorm. I was like headed for the chips, even though I know I'm supposed to be eating raw. I couldn't believe that. I'm like, my God, you're gonna die if you leave. Why don't you just stay and we'll talk about this? No. So, but he did leave I really left a great impression, at least health-wise, on that situation. So you have room to change your diet. You have room to change your diet. I really, really want you to try. Even the people who are already eating fabulously. The average American is eating just a half a teaspoon of kale a day, which is just hilariously low. Isn't that hilarious how low that is? But 32 teaspoons of added sugars a day. A lot of it in liquid candy, in pops and things. So get rid of some of that added sugar. Crank up on your vegetables. You're just going to live longer. But if all you think of vegetables as is potatoes, head lettuce, canned tomatoes, this is going to be a big, fat, boring failure. Go crazy on the produce section. Have a ton of fun on all of the squashes and all of the different varieties of apples and the different varieties of bananas. Everything you can find. Just eat all that crazy food. So, dietary change sometimes isn't easy, for sure. I had all of my old standby recipes. My mom taught me how to cook them. I've been cooking them for my kids my whole adult life, and all of a sudden we were eating all kinds of different food. But new recipes were a lot of fun. I have those pinto bean bundles that are so delicious, and I have all kinds of Chinese food and Middle Eastern food that is really easy because so much of that food, when you transition, it's already veg, right? So it's very, very simple to transition with other cultures of food choices. You may be getting up in the morning and having a bowel movement every morning like you have your whole life. That is really not healthy. That really is the first sign that you're in a pretty unhealthy spot with your diet. When you eat, you should poop. It's an oral anal reflex, and it stimulates lower GI function to put something in the upper part of your GI tract. So if you're eating, you should start to feel something happening down below. Always very fascinating, like when I'm eating with my family, they're all very unhealthy, very overweight. My mother's whole entire side of her family, all of the men were bypassed or dead from heart disease by the time they were 60. Except my Uncle Jim, who married a Seventh-day Adventist and then moved to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and was a vegetarian up there, crazy Uncle Jim. He had his first heart attack when he was 83. And then he called me, and we visited over the phone for, 25 minutes. And then he said, I think I'm going to go vegan. I think that's great, Uncle Jim. So here he is. He's 85 now, living in Escanaba, Michigan, and he's vegan. It's just wonderful. You can always change. You're never too old. I had one little old lady, and I was talking to her about changing her diet in my office, and she said, Dr. Mary, do you just want me to go vegan? Is that what you want me to do? She was like 82. I said, yeah, Victoria, that's exactly what I'm talking to you about. And she goes, oh, okay, I can do that. That's what she did. And then 20 pounds later, she's off her cholesterol pills. We stopped half of her blood pressure pills. 82. But she's way too old, right? You can't change. And you can't ask somebody that old to change. That is absolute farce. You can completely tell anybody at any age, and it's all in your ability for your brain to be nimble and make and absorb those changes. So stable weight can result in weight loss. If you're like sitting here saying, I have worked so hard to lose weight, it's never going to happen for me. The average vegan is 40 pounds lighter than the average omnivore, so feel free to change this diet and lose some weight. And, we always used to go with the flow. I mean, I went out with my girlfriends and ate chicken wings and drank beer. Now, can we go somewhere else where I could maybe have some edamame, or can we go somewhere where there's an option for me? And everybody's great with that, but it's a little different. And I used to get nervous about asking the waitress what was in the food, but I'll tell you what, I have an egg thing, and if I eat any egg, I get very sick. So even though some people will say their GI tract gave them a ton of trouble, my GI tract actually streamlined, just like my ex-boyfriend's, wherever he is now. Both of us got a lot better with this diet. We didn't get worse. So I can tell you when people put egg in their pasta, I am like the eggometer. I have to ask where this stuff is coming from. But once I get rid of the eggs, I got rid of a ton of trouble. So you're going to see 2 weeks after you start this diet, things are just about the way they were before. Maybe you're noticing some digestive differences. You may be noticing some slight differences. About 2 weeks into this, it's my opinion that you see a big shift in all of the enzymes that are absorbing proteins, that are breaking down proteins, and after 2 weeks on this diet, you're going to get a little drop in your energy. So honor that. If you look at your watch, oh yeah, I'm 2 weeks into this, I am tired, then go ahead, lay down, and just get a couple of long night sleeps, just 8 or 9 hours, really good sleeps. And then after that, you're not going to see anything but huge improvements in your energy. Just beautiful levels of energy improvement, better skin, better eyes, everything on the right track. But that 2 weeks thing, you might see a little bump. So there's some people that actually also feel a lot of numbness and tingling in their feet. And you get a lot of data that you need vitamin B12, and then people worry that they're B12 deficient. But if you stopped eating all of your meat today, if you stopped today, it would take your liver 2 years to go through all of the B12 that it has stored in it. B12 stores in your liver, and you have tons of it in there. So don't let yourself get deficient by never giving yourself a B12 pill if you're going to go totally vegan. But don't worry about deficiencies 2 weeks into it. A lot of people think that numbness and tingling you feel in your feet is a result of a detoxification that you're going through by decreasing some of your fat stores, by changing your proteins, and that's usually very transient. So that's the whole story. Now, in Traverse City, but also in Madison, Wisconsin, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Pagosa Springs, Colorado, we've developed these Dr. Mary's Get Wasted groups. We started with Dr. Mary's Wasters, so this is an old slide, I gotta fix this, but we switched it all over to Get Wasted. What it is like Weight Watchers. It's a weekly meeting with a weigh-in and a facilitated group discussion. I design the lesson plans, and then these facilitators, directors in each community run the meetings for you. And it's focused on weight loss, but through high antioxidant, low-fat diets so that you get healthy in addition to losing weight. So if anyone's interested in starting this here, I want to talk to you. These are really wonderful little groups, and people aren't required to go vegan. It's not a militant vegan. It's a plant-based approach to weight loss that's designed to keep you healthy. So I think I have some time for questions. If anybody has questions, I can take maybe 4 or 5. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's such a great question. That is such a timely question. He's asking about any studies about the differences in the microflora of meat eaters compared to vegetarians or vegans. That's really the cutting edge of the science with vegetarian and vegan diets right now, is the changes in the bacterial concentrations. I tell my patients, when you are consuming meat, everyone has heard that meat sort of rots. It doesn't necessarily digest. It rots in a high acid environment. And that different bacteria like to hang around rotting animals than bacteria that like to hang around plants. So you do see a different type of bacteria in the colon, but you also see a different type of bacteria being supported by this high acid environment compared to a more alkaline environment when you're mostly digesting plants. So when people are taking probiotic pills, or there's some increasing interest in probiotic enemas where instead of trying to take the pill and absorb some bacteria after it's transported through your intestines, you're actually putting it in the right place in the first place. But when you're doing probiotics, you've got to make sure that you support them with appropriate nutrients. So these plant-based diets are very effective in getting healthy bacteria in your gut. And certainly a lot of the inflammatory arthritises are associated with bacteria that is supported by an acidic meat-based diet. But a lot of disease, particularly a lot of inflammation and autoimmune disease, relate to this healthy microbial flora. Chef AJ and I joked around about that if we could just find a guy for me that has healthy E. coli bloom, healthy microbial flora, everything would be perfect. So it turned out I did. I went to Veg Summerfest last summer and met this fabulous guy, and he's a vegan marathon runner. We're going to be presenting together this year. He runs marathons in every state, so when I'm here, he's going to be in Colorado running state number 30. He's really fabulous, and he does have fabulous microflora too, so we're very happy. Can I tell you a funny story? Do you want to hear a funny poop story? Everybody loves bathroom humor, right? So when you're eating dinner with my family, I eat my dinner and then I have to use the bathroom. Whenever anybody invites me to their house, everybody's vegan, and it's always very charming, and that's just a sweet story. So we went to his brother's house for dinner. And they made all of this delicious vegan food, and I just ate like a pig, like I always do, and then got up and went and used the bathroom. And then when I came out of the bathroom, there was a line of 2 of the little vegan kids and 2 of the vegan grown-ups, and they're all standing there, like tapping their foot, going, when is this girl going to get out of there? So the whole story is, if you go crazy vegan and then you fall in love with some crazy vegan, be in the front of the bathroom line after dinner. The back of the line is not where you want to be. Isn't that a disgusting story? So you can see why we're so happy together. Yeah, the transit time. It varies from person to person. It can be as short as 8 hours from something to go into your mouth and come out the other end, or it could be up to 2 days. The best thing to do is eat some beets and then wait, because you'll definitely know. I mean, everything changes, right? Eat beets. Okay, that'll be your best indicator of transit time. Or you can come see me and I can write an order for transit time testing. I can have you swallow some radiolucent tablets, and then we can x-ray you every 4 hours. Or you could just eat some beets. Well, you get a color change. So sometimes Mark and I do both of this. He said, you know what I love to do? And I was like, oh my God, this guy, I love to do the same thing. We cut up a whole bunch of beets and put them on a cookie sheet and then put them in the oven and roast them. And they turn, have you ever done that? Oh, they roast and they're like candy. It just brings out all the sweetness. And then we leave the cookie sheet right on top of the stove and just eat them all afternoon on a Saturday, like when you're running around your house doing stuff. And then I swear, I eat so many beets that my pee turns red in addition to my number 2. And I'm like, oh my God, this could possibly be too many. Except it's all anti-cancer, right? That red, that dark, that beta-carotenes and all of the terrific cancer-fighting chemicals in dark red things. So it can't be hurting anything to concentrate that in my urine too. So good for me. Anyway, I love to do that. So eat a ton of beets. It's not going to hurt a thing. And they're full of calories. They really fill you up. Yeah, Alice wants to know about lowering your cholesterol and its function, and whether or not that's a universal phenomenon. I find that it often is. I think sometimes people can get in the way of themselves by continuing with a lot of added oil in a plant-based diet, or by eating a lot of high-fat plants like avocados or things. What was the other thing? Oh, and nuts. You know, I do love nuts. I personally love nuts. I try to limit myself to 2 handfuls, but that tends to be that I buy some nuts with the intent to limit myself and I eat a jar and I don't eat them for several weeks. So those are the things you want to be careful of because there's still quite a bit of fat. I mean, nuts we say are a great source of protein, but if you flip them over, they're 80% calories from fat and not really that much protein. So some people argue that you should soak your nuts because a nut is a concentrated source of energy that's waiting in the cold, and then once it gets super soaked, it'll sprout. So you move it more toward being able to release its nutrients by soaking it first. I think a couple handful of nuts has been shown to reduce your risk for breast cancer in women, and that was best studied with peanuts. But the best fats in nuts are walnuts. But the best thing to do is really continue to put a strong focus on grains and beans. Nuts got their very, very terrific reputation by being a good source of concentrated calories in people who are following a plant-based diet. So it's not going to help you to eat, meat and dairy and then grab a handful of nuts as a snack. It's much more suitable, even in a great plant-based diet, to grab an apple as a snack or grab, some roasted vegetables that you've tossed with a little vinaigrette, if you're particularly hungry. So one more question, and then otherwise everybody wants to leave, but they feel obliged to stay, and it just turns awful. A lot of food. Oh, that's such a great question. What is the recommended daily calorie intake? Because 2,000 seems like a lot of food. Really, when 2,000 calories seems like a lot of food for some people, but when you're eating plants, for some reason, it revs you up. We don't know why, but a whole bunch of times, people have tried to do studies where they compare the meat eater to the vegetarian, and they make an equivalent amount of calories going in and an equivalent amount of exercise. And they can never do the study. They can never create that randomized trial because vegetarians eat more calories and they move more. They just can't not walk the dog. Like, I'll have people come into my office. I can tell you by the time I get to the point of doing their physical exam, I don't even have to do a 24-hour recall. I can tell you how much meat they're eating because my meat eaters are just sitting there. But if you're sitting with a vegetarian, they're crossing and uncrossing their legs, and they're tapping the table, and they're busy gesticulating. I mean, they just move, And I had one gal, huge woman, like almost 300 pounds, and we worked on her diet, and we've taken off 65 pounds, but she's stalled out a little bit. She just has some addictive issues that I'm having a hard time breaking through with her. But she said, it's just been so weird. Like, I've never been able to get out of my chair, but now, after dinner, I tell my husband, you got to take me for a walk. I got to go for a walk. And so now she's walking every single night. Like, isn't that amazing? After all those years of being just trapped in that lazy boy, now she finally has the energy to move. So you'll find the same thing as you shift. It's not a calorie count issue, though. And the Get Wasted groups are not calorie counting or portion control groups. It's all about restricting these unhealthy foods so you can just get super healthy. If you want me to sign you up for my blog or my email updates for where I am or when I've posted on my blog or Meatless Monday recipes, there's a sign-up sheet going around, and then I'll take care of that for you. Okay, thank you again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Clifton, for your excellent and very enjoyable talk on a weighty topic. We'd now like to invite all of you to enjoy some delicious samples of vegan foods donated by the generosity of Down to Earth. Mahalo to all of you for coming, and have a safe return home. Good night.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org. This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
It is now time for our special guest. We're delighted to welcome Dr. Mary Clifton. Mary Clifton, MD, who is a graduate of Michigan State University, has practiced internal medicine for nearly 20 years in northern Michigan, where she teaches her patients about the importance of following a plant-based diet. She is a nutrition counselor for a cancer survivors group and is currently conducting a funded study that is researching the effects of plant-based diets on arthritis and fibromyalgia. Dr. Clifton is also a clinical associate professor at Michigan State University's College of Human Medicine, where she lectures to students on nutrition and organizes the lecturers responsible for nutrition education at medical colleges. Dr. Clifton has co-authored with her daughter, Chelsea Clinton, an OB/GYN physician in Manhattan, a book with the same title as her talk this evening, and runs a very active website and blog at drmarymd.com. She is currently visiting Hawaii with her younger daughter, Anna. Anna, would you like to stand and take a bow? There she is. Hope you're enjoying Hawaii. Great. Dr. Clifton's presentation tonight is entitled Waste Away: How to Lose Weight Joyfully and Supercharge Your Life. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mary Clifton.
Speaking. Flowers for you. Aloha. Vegan home.
It's quite different than All right. Thank you so much for coming tonight. This is 2 speaking engagements while I'm here in Hawaii, and then I'm going to go to Kauai and put my feet up for a week and relax before I move from northern Michigan to northern Minnesota. A little bit colder, but a little bit more fun up there with some really neat opportunities to work with telemedicine and forward the opportunity to bring doctors to locations where doctors aren't easily accessible. So thank you for coming tonight. I personally, was doing ordinary internal medicine for many years and having fun and seeing my patients and raising my kids. And then I went to the doctor 6 years ago, and everything was great at my appointment. But when my laboratories came back, he stopped me in the hallway a few days later at the hospital and told me that my cholesterol was 211, and more alarmingly, that my blood sugar was 125. Which at 126, we make a diagnosis of diabetes. So I was well on my way to being a diabetic, just in my late 30s. Which was just such a shock for me because I was exercising and I was eating well. I got up every morning and ate some frosted mini wheats with skim milk, and then at 10 o'clock I ate a yogurt or a piece of cheese to get my calcium and maintain my protein, right? And then at lunch, I had a cherry chicken salad, which in Traverse City, everyone is like our standard salad. We have chicken with a whole bunch of cheese and some dried cherries because we're the cherry capital. And then I'd have a little bit more yogurt or cheese in the afternoon, and then meat, 2 veggies at night, right? It was the perfect American diet, so there was no reason for me to be getting sick. But I didn't know anything about nutrition really. 11 years of training, and really no training at all on nutrition. And so I went home with this diagnosis of prediabetes and cracked open my computer and started to learn and tried to figure out exactly what a saturated fat was and what carbohydrates are and what's a good carbohydrate versus a bad carbohydrate. And I realized all the advice I was giving my patients and all the advice I was following for my own diet was coming from what I was watching on the television really, and not from anything I had ever learned. And so anyway, after a couple of weeks of just digging around and not really finding anything that seemed to make a lot of sense, I had read about these vegetarian vegan diets, but there was no way that that was something I would pursue. Then I thought it might hurt me and not be healthy, and where would I get my protein? It's really funny looking back. But in any case, I had a vegan day. I just accidentally had a vegan day. I had my milk sour, so I couldn't have milk with breakfast, and I didn't pack my snacks, so I didn't have my yogurt and cheese. And then my lunch was served to me. I wasn't in charge of my lunch, and that turned out to be vegan. And when I went out for steak that night, they didn't have the cut I preferred, so I had pasta instead. And then oddly, in the morning, my sugar was approaching 100 for the first time since my diagnosis. So I kind of, well, all right, I'm going to take a run at this and see how